Greetings, everyone. Sean from the future here. This voiceover is being recorded on the evening of March 22nd, 2019.
Dragon's Lair.
So what we're seeing here is the rolling demo that was sent out to BBSs and stores and whatnot to promote the Amiga version of Dragon's Lair. Now, the thing that was really cool about this is this game actually came out in 1987, so about 4 years after the arcade game. And there had been a few sort of attempts at home versions, basically like turning them into platformers and whatnot, like for the Commodore 64 and so forth. But when this version came out, this is the first time anybody had seen a home version of Dragon's Lair that actually looked comparable to the arcade version. I mean, obviously, the animation's been simplified, the frame rate's been cut down and whatnot, and you'll notice a lot of the levels in the game have also been shortened considerably as well. Now, this is interesting. This is a scene that actually did not appear in the original arcade game. It was created, but for whatever reason, it didn't actually appear in the game itself. So they added it in for the home version. So it's kind of like, wow, we're getting bonus scenes. Amazing. Ah, the good old drink me scene. I remember in the arcade version, you turn basically into a pillar of salt and just kind of fall to pieces. In this one, you just kind of flash and disappear. But this was pretty impressive for 1987. I mean, everybody else was playing on their Commodore 64s, and then we go into a store and see this running in a demo. Now, I didn't actually see this in action until I got the home version. It was, I had seen, I think, pictures of it, and I was like, wow, this looks just like the arcade version. I should mention also a nice little fun fact here. Mark Vange, the director of this game, ran a game studio that I briefly worked for. And it was kind of a big deal for me. It was like, wow, I'm working for the guy who made the home version of Dragon's Lair. How cool is that as an Amiga and Dragon's Lair fanboy? But, yeah, it didn't last very long. It's a long, sordid story there, but, yeah. But it was cool for however short it lasted. I remember this level in the arcade, I was always really good at it, and I liked it because even though it's a long, elaborate sequence of going down these various water areas, the actual moves you had to do were quite simple. I noticed in the home version here, they actually reversed the order as well. It originally ended with the whirlpools. The rapids were in the middle, and then there was another level before that where you had to go into these little caves, but for whatever reason, they cut out the first part and rearranged the other two. And then this one, of course, the colored balls. Another one I always liked in the arcade because the moves were really simple. And the only thing they cut out was the jumping over the pit at the end. This sequence with the night, with the electricity, they actually kept the whole damn thing in. Like, this is the entire scene as it originally appeared in the arcade, which is pretty cool. Most of them, they kind of truncated in one form or another. There we go. And it's odd that this scene appears so late, because I remember in the arcade, it would often appear at the beginning, or one of the earlier levels. And look at that, already we're at the Dragon's Lair. Now this, of course, is quite a long, elaborate scene. Runs about 2.5, 3 minutes in the original arcade game. And Daphne's speech is much longer in the arcade game. Yeah, so they just have one little thing of dodging the dragon. Then suddenly you've got the enchanted sword. And look at this, we just dodge his tail like 3 times. So this is kind of how they got around it, got around the limited space. It was just repeating sequences over and over again. You have to understand, this game came on, I think, 5 or 6 floppy disks. So all this animation was off of floppy disks. This was before the days of CD-ROM, where you could just cram the whole damn game on there. Yeah, this was all done off floppies. So this is well before the era of CD-ROM. Now, Dragon's Lair Escape from Singe's Castle was a quote-unquote sequel game that they put out, which featured more levels from the original Dragon's Lair. But since, of course, Singe had already been defeated in the first game, they needed a new villain for this one. So what they used was this guy, who you might remember from the swinging ball and spiky vines level of the original game. They basically turned him into the Shadow King or something, where the idea was he was actually the real evil behind everything and was Singe's boss, essentially. So they created some new animation and a couple of new levels featuring this character to have him kind of established as the villain. Now this was pretty cool, seeing how they did the swinging flaming vines, where they essentially had like parallax scrolling for the background flying by as he's swinging. So that was a pretty big deal when it came out, like basically full screen, full motion animation, which using the parallax scrolling rather than doing it as animation was quite smooth. Yeah, here, so we have that scene. Now, you saw Daphne in the background there. Of course, originally in that scene, Daphne was not there. She was in the Dragon's Lair. But, and this is kind of neat. It's showing how you could actually take the original Dragon's Lair game and merge it with Escape from Singe's Castle to have one ginormous game. And basically have as complete a version of the original as you could possibly have, in addition to all of the new scenes that were created for Escape from Singe's Castle. Now, if you've been following the retro videos, you know that I was having quite a heck of a time getting Escape from Singe's Castle. I kept ordering it, and it just wasn't arriving. So by this point, I had essentially given up and decided, you know what, I really want to show these games to Jason, so I'll just show him the demo, which shows you a good chunk of the game anyway, and we'll go from there. Now here, of course, you have Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp, which, interestingly enough, this home version came out before the arcade game. Yeah, it came out about a year before the arcade game. And then it showed up in the arcades, and you're like, oh my god, there's like even more to these scenes that we've been playing in the home version. So it was pretty cool. But this was actually our first look at Dragon's Lair 2, the sequel. So I think at the time we didn't realize, like my friends and I didn't realize there actually was a full sequel that they'd done, and thought that this was something original that ReadySoft had done to continue the story. But yeah. Dragon's Lair 2 was quite a bit different from Dragon's Lair 1. Where Dragon's Lair 1 was just kind of short levels where each one was like a room in the castle. Dragon's Lair 2, each level was much like the Dragon's Lair level of the first one, where it was just an extended scene where there was a whole sequence of things you had to do, and each scene would last 2 or 3 minutes. And it was quite elaborate in comparison. But I always liked the sequel a lot, actually. They kind of added to the mythology a little bit. They had this time machine. They had the wizard Mordroc, who was apparently the brother of the spirit of the time machine. The wizard's brother had been turned into the time machine, and then he kind of teams up with Dirk to help you defeat his evil brother. And meanwhile, the brother Mordroc has kidnapped Daphne yet again. So, in terms of the actual canon of the game, I think Mordroc was actually the one behind everything and was actually Singe's boss. So, yeah. So, as you can see, there's quite a lot more to the scenes here. And I mean, what you're seeing in this home version, which again was just off of floppy disks, isn't even close to how lengthy the levels actually were. So, much as they did with the first one, with Escape from Singe's Castle, with this one, they did a sequel as well called Dragon's Lair 3, Mordred's Revenge or something. Not Mordroc, Mordred. So, to explain the fact that Mordroc had been defeated at the end of Dragon's Lair 2, in Dragon's Lair 3, they basically put Mordroc in drag and said that it was his sister. And once again, created some new animation scenes to kind of fill it out and have more from the second game in it, and kind of pretend that it was a whole new game. They did the same thing with the Space Ace games, actually. They did Space Ace, and then Space Ace 2, Borf's Revenge, which featured additional scenes from the original Space Ace, plus some new scenes to make it into a quote-unquote new game. So, yeah, so you can see that there's supposed to be a lot more to the ending. Dirk's about to chase after. In the actual game, there is more. There is a bit more of a fight, and then he finally gets the kiss at the end. And that is it for Amiga Dragon's Lair. I never got Dragon's Lair 3. I did eventually get Escape from Singe's Castle, but it was literally about a decade later, and I never managed to finish it. But at least I showed Jason all that I had at the time, so yeah. So anyway, back to me from the past to give my final thoughts on Dragon's Lair for the Amiga.
Surprise! Yeah, I figured, what the hell, I've made you wait long enough. I still haven't got the Escape from Singe's Castle yet, as you may have noticed. But I've had the demo for quite a while, so I figured I'd at least show you that. In case you were wondering why there were scenes from the first game in the demo for Escape from Singe's Castle, it's because it was demonstrating how you can link them both together on hard disk. Rather interesting. Anyway, I have very little tape left, so that's it for part 2. See you on part 3. Bye.